Hello everyone. Today let's look at the link between the chapters in your research report. So now usually you know that when it's come to a thesis, dissertation, or even in an article that you're planning to submit to a particular journal, so there should be a link in between the main topics in your research article. Now, if we specifically talk about the dissertations or the theses that basically you're submitting for your undergraduates or the postgraduate degree programs, we nearly have 5 or 6 chapters starting from introduction to conclusion. So today we are going to identify the link between each and every chapter which assists you to do your research and write your research in a proper way. Right. Now you can see here, these are the chapters of a research report. So basically you have the introduction as the chapter 1, then the chapter 2 is the literature review, the methodology and the results will be chapter 3 and 4, and chapter 5 and 6 will be the discussion and the conclusion. Hope you remember that in our previous videos we discussed that sometimes the research or the dissertation, so the thesis chapters could be either 5 or 6, depending on how you amalgamate all these chapters. Now, basically, you have introduction, literature review, and the methodology as first 2, 3 chapters. There are some situations where some are going to amalgamate these results and discussion chapters together. So in that case, you are writing your results as well as the discussion together. So in that sense, you don't have 6 chapters, you have only 5 chapters. So now let us look at by using an example how to link these chapters. And also I want to tell you is that if you are looking from the beginning to the end, introduction to the conclusion, this is the link. So usually as we discuss, basically we start our research by readings. So you need to do the literature review. Then you are going to get the base of your literature, thereby you are going to prepare the introduction. From the introduction, based on several subtopics in your introduction session, it directly links with the methodology. Methodology directly links with the results, then the results to discussion, and finally conclusion. So even though I have explained this from left to right by using arrows, each and every chapter is linked with each and every other chapters. So you need to keep this in your mind thoroughly. So you need to identify this link before you start your research and to write your research in a proper way. So as I said earlier, so let's look at using a particular example on how to link these chapters specifically. Right. Okay. So let's take a look at a research topic. Now, for an example, let's say the research topic is the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing firms in Sri Lanka. Even you can write it as companies. So no worries in that. So we have discussed about how to identify or how to develop a research topic earlier on. So you can refer that video as well. So now, based on this particular topic, let's try to identify the link between each and every chapter. Now you can see there's a comprehensive diagram, but it's very easy for you to understand. Now, hope you remember that continuously I'm saying that yes, you have to do readings. You need to analyze the current trends on the specific interested area. So based on that, you are coming up with an research topic. So in this scenario, you can see that here we have all the 6 chapters. Now here the dotted line arrows are there. Dotted line arrows are there. So it simply says that each and every chapter is having some other subtopics before the topics or before the subtopics that we are going to discuss for our interpretation purpose only, right? So you have many other subtopics than research problem, research questions, and research objectives in the introduction session. Then if you look at the literature review section or the chapter, you have different subtopics other than the literature gap. Then if you look at the methodology chapter, you have some other subtopics other than the conceptual framework, research method, and the hypothesis. Likewise, so these dotted line arrow indicates that you have some other subtopics other than these things, which we are going to discuss for today. It is for your clarification. Now, we are going to start by readings, which means we are going to start our research by doing a literature review. Now, suppose you have done a comprehensive analysis and identified the current trends, and you have already finalized your research topic. So your research topic was the impact of debt financing on financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So now, once you have identified this particular topic, so you are doing some extensive literature review regarding the theories related to study and the empirical results related with the current study. And finally, you are going to write a particular gap in this particular topic. What is the gap? Right? So you have done a lot of readings, then you have identified that yes, these are some of the gaps which have not been, I mean, the examined, which have not been identified yet. So that's the gap. So at the end of the literature review, what you're going to do is you are going to write the gap like this. Right now, here, this is the first step. This is the first aspect that you want to identify. So here I have numbered it as one, right? So the literature gap is there, right? The literature gap is there. You can read this particular gap and identify the exact idea of this. So this is the starting point when it's come to the link of each and every chapter, each and every chapter, right? So based on this literature gap, you are going to write the research problem, that is number two. Based on this literature gap, you are going to write it as a problem under the research problem in your introduction chapter. Now, for an example, let's say under the literature gap, you have written like, while numerous global studies have investigated the impact of debt financing on financial performance, the majority focus on developed markets with mature financial systems. In contrast, emerging economies like Sri Lanka present a distinguished financial landscape shaped by macroeconomic instability, limited access to capital markets, and sector specific challenges. So, despite the manufacturing being a key driver of the economic growth in Sri Lanka, there is a noticeable lack of empirical evidence examining how debt financing impacts on financial performance. Right. So, likewise, further it says still uh, the impact is not clear because some researchers says there's a positive impact, some researchers says there's a negative impact, some researchers says there's no impact. So the mixed arguments are there. So likewise, based on the literature review that you have done, ultimately you are writing this gap. Then you will write this as a problem, as I earlier said, under the research problem in your introduction chapter, right? So that is how your literature review link initially with the introduction part, more specifically the research problem. So here you can say, it says under the research problem, despite the central role of manufacturing sector in Sri Lankan economic development, there is a significant lack of empirical research exploring how debt finance impacts the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies. You can see the references are there because the research problem should be strong. It should be backed by several evidences. Further, existing results about the impact of debt financing and financial performance are not conclusive. Still, there are different arguments about the impact. Right? So while debt financing is often used as a tool to drive growth, its effectiveness can vary widely depending on company-specific factors and macroeconomic conditions set by these authors. So likewise, with the help of references, you write your research problem strongly based on the literature gap that you have identified under your literature review. That is how initially the review chapter links with your introduction. So now you have written your research problem. Based on that, you are going to write your research question. Right now you can see the research problem is going to link with the research question. So the research question is, what is the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka? So based on this research question, we are deriving the research objective, and the research objective is to examine the impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So you can see the research question is derived from the research problem, and the research objective is derived from the research question. Right? So that is the fourth link that you can see. So now what we are going to do, we have our objective. So based on this objective, we are going to develop our methodology. That is number five. That is number five. So when it's come to the methodology, you have other subtopics other than the conceptual framework. So that is what this dotted line indicates. You have the introduction to methodology, something like that. So then in the middle, you have the conceptual framework, right? So you design your conceptual framework based on your research topic and the objective, and the conceptual framework reflects your research topic or the objective, or simply it's a snapshot of what you're going to do. So in here you can see that your independent variable is debt financing, dependent variable is financial performance. You are going to identify the impact of debt financing on financial performance. So the arrow is there to the right hand side to the financial performance. And here you are going to indicate your hypothesis number. Right? So this is how you are going to link your objective with the methodology chapter, starting from the conceptual framework. Then after your conceptual framework, number 6, you are going to write your research hypothesis. Right? Hypothesis is simply an assumption where you can test. So we simply call the hypothesis are as testable assumptions. You can test. So you need to write the hypothesis. Now in here you have only one hypothesis. So simply you can put H1 and you can write the hypothesis. Once you write the hypothesis, after the hypothesis, you have to simply write certain evidences why you have written that hypothesis. Again, based on the literature. Right now, here the hypothesis is, it says there's a significant impact of debt financing on the financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So that is the hypothesis. So after writing this hypothesis, you need to write nearly, let's say, for an example, one para, why you have written the hypothesis like this based on the support of the literature. So you have to say several authors said that there's a positive impact, several authors says there's a negative impact. However, some other authors says there is no any impact. Likewise, you have to write, because once you have written something like that with the support of your literature review after your hypothesis, it gives a clear meaning for the hypothesis that you have written, because there should be a particular, I mean, the rationale of this hypothesis, right? So the rationale you have to write after this hypothesis, as I explained, right? One para is enough based on the literature. So then you can write the summary of the research hypothesis like this at the end, and you can open a table and you can simply say, yes, this is my research problem, sorry, research objective. So accordingly, this is the hypothesis relevant to that particular objective. So likewise, you can elaborate it, or you can present it at the end of that particular explanation, right? So again, I'm saying after the conceptual framework, you need to write your research hypothesis. This is my hypothesis. Likewise, after that, you need to write a one para document saying why you have written that hypothesis like that with the support of the literature. Then if you want, at the end of that particular para, you can open a table like this and you can simply say, this is my research objective and this is the hypothesis, because it's very clear for the reader, right? So now you can see the research hypotheses are derived based on the conceptual framework or vice versa. Then, based on the hypothesis and based on your objective, you can write the method that you are going to achieve the objective. Now, here it says a summary of the research method, right? You can elaborate these things using a para, and after that, you can draw this table and summarize everything, because as I said earlier, so reader should understand each and everything in a clear way, right? So now what you're going to do, you are going to tell this is the method that I am going to use to achieve my objective. My objective is to examine the impact of debt financing on financial performance of listed manufacturing companies or firms in Sri Lanka. So it's a panel data. So I'm going to achieve the objective by doing a regression analysis. Likewise, you have to take. So now, for the moment, if I put you the things in a very simple way, we are doing a comprehensive literature review. After that, we have to write our own paragraph by identifying the gaps in the literature, unidentified areas yet, like this. Based on that, we are writing it as a problem under the research problem in our introduction. So that is the initial stage that the literature review links with the introduction. There are other ways as well, but because under the background of the study in the introduction, still you have to write the important based on the literature, right? Then based on your research problem, you develop your research questions. Then based on your research questions, you develop your research objectives. Then based on the research objectives, you are developing the things under the methodology. First, you elaborate your conceptual framework, then the research hypothesis, then the methods. So you can see the link, right? You can see the link. Still, objective matters. Objective matters. Then what happened? Now we have to go to our fourth chapter, that is the results chapter. So based on your research objective and the method that you are going to achieve the objectives, you have to do the data analysis using SPSS, Stata, eViews, whatever. Then you have to interpret the results, right? You have to interpret the results. So when it's come to the interpreting the results, you have to write it based on objective wise. So it's very clear for the reader to understand, right? So because you are separating subtopics to subtopics. So under each and every subtopics, you are specifically writing the things, right? So when you are going to write the results, you need to write it in terms of objective wise. Now here we have only one objective. So you can simply write the objective one colon, then the entire objective. After that, you can write the results of that particular objective, right? So once you complete writing that objective, then again you have to go to the chapter 5, that is discussion, right? You have to go to the chapter 5, that is discussion chapter. Again, you need to arrange your discussion based on your objective. Whatever the results that you achieved, you need to support it by the literature. For an example, let's say you got a result that there is a positive impact of debt financing on financial performance of listed manufacturing companies in Sri Lanka. So you have to prove it under the discussion section based on your literature. So sometimes you have to take the previous literature that you have written under literature review, or sometimes new literatures. So what you're going to write in there, not only for me, these results has arisen also for these authors in different countries. So these are the reasons why we say there's a positive impact. Likewise, you need to prove your results are fair. Again, you have to write it based on the objective wise. It's very clear, right? It's very clear, right? So from the methodology to results, point number 8. Then from results to discussion, point number 9. Then finally, your final chapter, right? That is conclusion. So under this conclusion, you are going to write limitations, recommendations, right? So in the middle, you have to write the conclusion of your research. So here, this is how it happens. Again, you need to write your research objective and you need to conclude the results, right? So you are concluding the results as, for an example, I have written there is a significant positive impact or there is a positive impact. So usually we are not writing the significant part when it's come to the conclusion, because uh, if it is positive and if it is significant, at the end we are not going to tell it is significant. Otherwise we have to reject me, right? So there is a positive impact. So that is your conclusion. There's a positive impact, right? So that is the conclusion. So based on the objective, that is your conclusion, right? So again, you can see that here I have indicated this black color symbols, two symbols with this particular arrow. Again, your conclusion link with the research objective in your introduction chapter. So at the end, you have to check whether you achieved your results, sorry, you achieved your objectives or not. Right? So that's why I said each and every chapter is having link with each and every other chapter. So now if you look at this particular illustration clearly, you can see that research objective matters. It is there each and every part in your each and every chapter, each and every chapter. So ultimately you have to validate, you have to check whether the research objectives have been achieved or not. So that's why we say, if you look at your entire research report, there are links. If you change something, you have to check whether the other things in other chapters have to be changed or not, because everything is driven by your research objective. Research objectives. Ultimately, you can see it. You have to validate or you have to check whether you have finally achieved your research objectives or not. your research objectives or not. So this is the simple link between the chapters